Hello everyone, and welcome to this assembly and painting video of The Watcher from Kingdom Death Monster. This is the original end boss, at least pre 1.5, of Kingdom Death Monster, and is an interesting build. As you can see, I have all the pieces laid out, at least when I'm not holding the body in the way. Different from how you usually see me lay things out, where I have the body in the middle, and then things around it relative to where they go. But there were so many different pieces for this that I needed to plan out where things went that they are all laid out, as you can see very clearly right here, in where they go relative to the model if the rest of it was all put together. So this was to help me actually assemble everything, because oh boy is this one a complex model, and I ended up finishing this before, at least the assembly, before Kingdom Death put out the official build guide for the core game, which I highly recommend looking up if you want to build this. But some ideas are here as well. Speaking of which, with ideas and such, there are certain pieces, you'll see them later, in which they are triangular and they get put in the top part of, or really the middle part of the inside, next to the rope-like bit that's coming out now, that don't fit in properly, and you're going to want to shave them down. I'll point them out again later, but I just felt like mentioning that now. So this model is actually really well designed in terms of everything. Like, I needed to do very little putty work. I think I had to do a seam on the side, and like, things are just, I'm surprised nothing on this is broken yet. On my own personal one, like, none of these have snapped to my knowledge. Maybe one did, and I'm just forgetting it was something else. But that piece it's either that piece that I just put in, and or the piece that you just now saw in, that I had to shave down in order to get them fit. I needed to dry fit them before. This one is really annoying because it goes in between the two pieces of the body, and it's just a pain. And also, I kind of had some confusion there of which piece was which, so I had to rip that one out, which thankfully didn't destroy it. But this piece, as you can see, just goes in fine and everything. Again, this model is really intricate and well done. I love that the cloth itself that you can see ends up actually being a balancing point for the model, I believe, or it comes very close to it. And it's just really interesting. Also, minus the lanterns hanging off and the bolts of electricity coming out of it, it's a very simplistic model. It's like 5-6 pieces, surprisingly. But as a note, because I've seen this in some pictures, those are lightning bolts, not vines. It's made very clear in artwork in the 1.5 version that is post-original endgame content. And I'll just stop there with explaining why that's there. And so I made sure to paint it like a lightning color that you'll see later. But also, as a more important note, almost all of them go entirely on the outside, and the ones that don't go on the outside, oh, and there's the model actually, the entirely assembled minus the base. As I was saying, the ones that don't go on the outside are practically on the outside. The one particularly to the bottom left of the screen there, as I was saying. Now, he was a bit of a pain to get to hold on the model, or onto the base, but not as bad as the Screaming Antelope, who, yeah, I needed to pin that. And then, so, a decent chunk of the model, as you can see, is already painted. This is one of the models where I first started skipping painting large sections of pre-work, so yeah, like the base is painted and all that black. That model was not primed black. This model was primed white, and then I realized I should have primed it black, but I left certain parts of it white, particularly the parts that I want, well, lit up. And I'm painting that right now. The lanterns, to be precise. I get to the electrical bolts later, but I've sped things up here a bit more, and mainly because, just like with the hand, I ended up taking way too much time on parts of this. I should have just slapped it right on, and then added the black trimming to make up the lantern's metal itself afterwards, which I actually forgot to do on camera, so at a certain point, you'll just see that suddenly on there. But yeah, this ends up taking a decent amount of time. There's actually a lot of lanterns on here. Not as many lanterns as there are hands on the Phoenix, but there's not as many hands on the survivors as a whole, it almost feels like, as there are the Phoenix. Ugh. But for the most part, I just ended up painting it this almost arcane blue color that I use a lot for magical glows and things like that, but it also works as a good base coat for wanting an electrical blue actual lighting effect, and also a dry brush for the ambient lighting that you'll see later on this model. Now, I don't leave this model black. As you can see, I'm getting to dry brushing it. No, I didn't skip to the dry brush coat. This model, I'm technically using all three of my main paint styles at once. I'm using my more colorful paint style for the lightning bolts and technically the lanterns. I'm using my dark paint scheme for the cloth of the model, which, again, you saw a lot of my Dark Souls painting videos. And I'm going for making the model green, but while I was still on that point, you'll later also see my standard paint style for that strip of cloth that wraps around his body, and you'll see more detail as to why later if you haven't seen the model finished before. But I wanted to go with the shade of green. All the artwork that I've seen from the Watcher ends up being either black or dark green. But looking at the artwork for the unreleased expansion, the Lantern Festival from the first Kickstarter, it is very clear that the cloth from the Watcher is supposed to be a dark green. And I believe I actually did use 2 shades in the dry brushing. I can't really remember. It's been a long time. And then here's a quick application of the blue. Same blue as on the lanterns. I don't know why I did them so far apart. Might have been the dry brushing, but I did this model a long time ago as of the audio recording. And it just ends up painting all of that. For the longest time, I say that they're not vines because for the longest time, I actually thought they were. I thought those were just like vines coming out of it. I knew nothing about the model, and I've seen people paint them as such. But for the most part, like in all the artwork, they are very clearly electricity. Or they're not there at all. So vines would make even less sense. Now, here I'm doing the cloth around the body itself, which is covered in stone faces. I don't want to even contemplate how that works, but this is the part that I was saying I do in my main paint style that you've seen me do a lot of other Kingdom Death stuff in, where I'm going to actually ink this later, and that's pretty much the only part of the model I'm going to actually apply an ink wash to. But every single one of those, like, ovals you're seeing, because sometimes it's blurring there for some reason, they're all faces. I found it really interesting that they were on there. I think both the unreleased armor from the Lantern Festival and also the Twilight Witch, which is the pinup Watcher, have this cloth going around them, and it's really interesting. And honestly, I would probably paint it the same way on those. Although the Twilight Witch, if I ever get around to painting that after it arrives, as per the Kickstarter, I don't know if I'll ever get around to it. The pinups will be something significantly later, unless my friends or one of you guys wants to see specific models painted, because otherwise it's just like, nah, I care more about the monsters, and I don't even have all the expansion monsters painted. Next, I move on to painting the little bits of metal that are on this model, which are primarily the rings connecting the lanterns to the, well, really the Watcher itself, if you want to count those strands of whatever as part of it, but also some of them are directly attached. I don't end up realizing till the touch-up stage that, again, I do off camera, that there's also 2 rings on the hood around where my finger is on the head of it. In fact, one of them's literally on it right now. And this was just, I like to do the rings on this stuff as a very clear metal as opposed to something really dark like the scrap metal is in this game in general, which I use still for the lanterns itself, which is just black dry brushed. with a metallic color. And that's actually what I do for a lot of things when I want them to still look black, but very clearly give off the effect of looks like metal. And like I said, suddenly the lanterns are all painted black. I believe, to the best of my knowledge, I didn't end up recording that part because it was such small details and I would have been there on camera forever and wasting your time. It was pretty much just sketching outlines. But as I said I would end up getting to, this is where I'm applying the ink wash, which, as I said before, is literally just for this piece of cloth. I'm trying to actually just keep to the stone face. It's probably the least amount of ink washing that I've done on a single model for this game, at least so far, both at the time of recording the video and the audio, which, again, excessive amount of time apart, but not too much. And then onto the dry brush, starting with a light green to really make the details of that cloak stand out. This is the color that I wanted to end up to begin with. Not like, as in I didn't want this to be the base coat. The base coat was very much a dark forest hunter green, and the highlights, I wanted something more light, like honestly, like a good plant color. And I just wanted it to stand out. Green's my favorite color, and I love working with shades of it, but they blend together way too well in the various different shades. I have shades that I can tell the difference looking at them, but the moment they get on a model, I can't tell the difference between them, which is both good and bad. Regardless, ends up being all the cloth except the strands. I believe, I don't actually remember what I painted those, and I think I might have done that off camera, but the flat, like, pieces of cloth, be they actually flat or not, as you can see, are all that shade of green. And it really brings out a lot of the detail. Then I move on to, as much as you really can't tell, this is me dry brushing the black, a metallic color. I barely even dry brush the lanterns themselves for any lighting effects. I really should have dry brushed them white to a degree, but I didn't end up doing so. And then onto the stone faces themselves. Takes a couple tries to get the right consistency, but it's just a quick dry brush of getting them to make this detail stand out. And when looking at the model up close, in person, this actually helped a lot with the details of the faces. I think one of them ended up really messed up, and I had to touch them up a lot off camera. But hey, it still worked. Then white to make the electricity look like it's more lit up. I could have gone with a lighter blue, but I wanted to go with white just for that contrast of just like, there's the dark and then there's the sudden light like popping out of it. And this is me using, back to the same blue as I mentioned before, using it for, I forget the term for it, but for regular lighting on the objects themselves. And then a secondary coat out of that, like it's the initial coat, but it's a secondary dry brush coat on top of the lanterns because I still wanted to make it look like they were being engulfed by the light themselves. And it just brings another level to the model and makes it look more realistic, to say, as close as you can get to realistic with this stuff. I probably should have done some of it to the base as well, but I didn't think about that at the time, and sealant coat's already been put on. Alright folks, that's the entire model. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to press the like button. If you think somebody else will enjoy this, please share this video. Either way, you'll help this video get seen more. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and press the dislike button, but please leave a constructive comment as to why, such as if you don't like the way I paint. Go ahead and, give me tips. And if you want to comment in general, feel free to, such as, again, if you want to give me tips in a more positive way, or if you want to request models you've seen me unbox, be it for this game or others, to see them painted sooner, which I've already done with some models, or at least one, and I have another one planned, but that's on the back burner. Or if you want to see more things of Kingdom Death or anything in general. And if you want to see more like this, be it more painting videos, my unboxing videos, and my board game overview videos, all three of which I do for Kingdom Death Monster, and anything else that I do on my channel, feel free to subscribe. Regardless, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.